And welcome to another exciting episode of Triple Tap. Although it looks a little bit scarce tonight, it's Tap Tap because we are missing one of our co-hosts. And I have with me, joining me tonight, Lance. How are you, Lance?
Good. Can you hear me okay?
Can hear you loud and clear. We have an apology from dear Kent tonight. He's unwell, so we send out our prayers and well wishes to Kent tonight to have a speedy recovery back to good health, because we have so much to achieve here at TAP. And we've got another exciting episode, ladies and gentlemen, tonight. So if you have any questions ready for tonight, please make sure you participate along in the chat box for us, and we'll be monitoring that and watching that and being able to ask your questions. Tonight we have a gentleman, and I'm just about to introduce him, but before I do, I always ask Lance, how has your week been and what have you been up to? I nearly forgot. I'm getting too excited.
The weeks are just getting busier and busier and busier. So, but we've always got plenty to do. We're moving forward, and there's some exciting stuff we're going to talk about tonight, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And I know we've been very, very busy helping you guys get the constitution ready for the gift of Born Oracle. So that's been pretty busy and exciting this week, and it's just been full on. So we just haven't stopped. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, the gentleman that I'm going to introduce to you tonight, some of you may already have heard when he was on, because he was back on episodes number 27 and 28. And tonight we are up to episode number 46. Can you believe it? In just a few short, time, I can't even talk tonight. I'm so excited. We'll have been going for 1 year. I just want to give a bit of a shout out. I mean, I love our viewers coming on every single week, but I've been thinking about doing this for a little while now. I've just got a little shout out I'd like to do to one lady in particular who always gets incredibly excited whenever we promote Triple Tap every single week. And I know she looks forward to it every single week. And even if we have to skip, she's like, that's okay. I'm really excited for the next one. So I just want to give a little bit of a shout out and a big thank you to probably our number one fan, and that is Christina. I know she's always watching and always excited when we do Triple Tap. So hi to Christina. So tonight we are going to be interviewing again Dr. David Nixon, and it's been a long time since we've had Dr. David on. He's also one of our executives, and Dr. David graduated from Otago University 30 years ago. He's been 25 years in general practice, both in New Zealand and in Australia. He's written several papers and reports on the management of long-term conditions in primary care, with a focus on diabetes, heart disease, and cardiovascular risk management. Dr. Nixon has worked in Brisbane for the last 12 years and currently working under the supervision and restrictions from APRA due to the serious public health risk posed by writing COVID-19 vaccination exemptions. Due to a complaint laid in 2016, he says he will be suspended by the Office of the Health Ombudsman this year or early next year. Dr. Nixon is currently suspended until August due to the complaint from that 2016, and will then face working under restrictions and investigations of every single one of the vaccination exemptions. He is currently fielding an APRA complaint over self-prescribing an anti-inflammatory medication before he was suspended in November 22. He's currently learning to use a dark field microscope and check people's blood for abnormalities. And I know he shared some of those findings with us over a period of time, also outside of Triple Tap. So it's been incredibly exciting to see what he's been doing. And he's been involved also with an international team of doctors and researchers working in this area. And we'll put his site up during the show tonight so that you guys can go and have a look and see what his findings are and read his reports. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to invite Dr. David Nixon to the call this evening. So please give him your support and some happy, awesome love emojis in the chat there. And Dr. David Nixon, if you'd just like to turn your camera on and come and join us and let's have a chat.
Good evening, Ainsley and Lance. Lovely to see you, and I can see everybody else who's in the chat there. Hi, Debbie. Hi, everybody else.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, well, Debbie, we've had Debbie on before as well. So, yeah, it's good to see some of our speakers also supporting us as well. So, David, since you last shared with us, what have you been up to? Because it seems like such a long time ago. What have you been up to?
Wow, it seems like 5 years ago, but I guess it was really only 7 or 8 months. But it's certainly been a very busy time, and I feel very humbled to be asked to be on the executive of the Australia project, and that's certainly been certainly learned how busy you guys have been.
We're blessed to have you.
Yeah, and certainly humbled and honoured to be asked to be the health minister for the Githabul Yokum Nation, and that's certainly providing.
So is that keeping you very busy, getting all that set up for the?
Yeah, that's certainly providing some additional fillers for any spare time that I have.
Excellent.
Yeah. So in terms of what I've been doing, right, gosh, trying to think about where that was at. I guess
you shared with us some slides, and I remember seeing some of those slides, and they looked like they had little computer chips in them. Now I'm a bit of a computer geek. That was the first thing that jumped out at me when you shared those slides all those long time ago. And you were talking about back then, you were doing some stuff with colloidal gold and things like that. So what else have you been discovering in those slides?
Right. Well, I've revisited quite a few of the older slides that I did in August last year, and certainly brought to the fore some of those blank structures that I've been looking at. There's been some recent documentation that's been uncovered from NATO sources where it's been talked about and advised that there was going to be cognitive warfare in the development of bio-nano weapons. So I certainly see. I spent quite a long time over the last 7 or 8 months defending the fact that what I and my colleagues have been looking at is not salt and cholesterol. It's becoming increasingly clear that it's not salt and cholesterol. I did do a bit of thinking about what we could talk about tonight. One thing that's become quite clear is the systemic nature of what we're dealing with and the number of different aspects to it all, I guess. The first thing I'd say is in terms of the structures I've seen, and you can now get a t-shirt from my website if you're interested. Yeah, where was I leading with that? Yeah, the first thing I'd say is that we're only seeing the structures predominantly in the Pfizer vaccine. We have seen some in the Moderna vaccine, but they've been quite a different kettle of fish, much lower quality and much lower sophistication. So it's really been only the Pfizer vaccine. One of my colleagues is working on he's been looking at other medical products other than vaccines, and he'll be announcing his findings shortly. So it's clear that it's not just the vaccines that we are going to have to be concerned about in the future. So watch the space on that one. But we have the technologies also involves what we call ribbons or filaments, like the one in the background behind me. And we've seen these structures in the vaccine, in blood, and also, unfortunately, in food, but also in rainwater, swabs, face masks, urine, organic celery. And it does seem to be more concentrated in more processed food than less processed food, and that's always, as a general rule, much better idea to have food with less ingredients and less processing. But I can certainly see that we're going to have to get organised and start community microscopy groups looking at local food. And I was actually phoned by somebody from South Australia today, and they've got a group getting together to buy a microscope and learn how to look at food and water. So I certainly would encourage other people to consider that.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like we need to make sure we get in our communities and start those community growing of the community, growing our own food, so that we know that we're eating fresh fruits and vegetables, so, and less processed foods and more community sort of healthy foods.
Yeah, and I think we can do more than that too, Ainsley. I think we need to be aware of what is coming down in the rain and from the sky, and certainly some of the overseas people that we've spoken to recently have said that, you know, they only they try and eat vegetables that are grown undercover, so they can some of the rain. I think we're certainly going to be a time where we're going to advise people how to treat vegetables, how to treat meat to minimise contamination.
David, I noticed that in the USA, the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines are no longer authorised for use in the United States. Why do you think they're still pushing them here in Australia? Because I know I can still see even on the ads on TV, not that I watch a lot of TV, but the ads are still pushing to get your booster, get your top up, and they're screaming at the ads like, no. Why do you think they're still pushing it here in Australia when other countries have already, it's no longer authorised for use?
Well, it's a good question, and I think the bigger question is, why do they push them in the first place?
Well, yeah.
And I think it's become apparent, and from the work that a number of people have done, but particularly Sasha Letapova, who brought to our attention that the vaccines are actually owned by the Department of Defence and not by the pharmaceutical companies. So the pharmaceutical companies have been contracted to deliver the vaccines, but they're actually owned by the US Department of Defence.
Which makes perfect Department of Defence. That makes perfect sense, because the world we live in is in a state of war. So what happens when you're in a state of war? Your constitutions get put in abatement, they get set aside, and you come under international laws of war. So we've been in a state of war since '73. United States has been in a permanent state of war. I don't think they ever are not in a state of war. So for me, that's a natural conclusion that the DoD would be behind this operation to depopulate the planet.
Yes, and I think I'm just reading somebody's comment in the chat who supports your comments there, Lance. And that's why I think it's as important to look at this whole situation as a system and try and understand what's going on. Medicine really relies on the government and the non-government organisations like the TGA and the APRA to keep things working and keep all the regulations and make sure that the appropriate safety checks and so on and so forth are done. And clearly that hasn't been working. And the system can't operate without that balance. You know, we need the government and the regulatory bodies to be effective. Otherwise, we're at the whim of the corporates and the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah.
So
it's almost like that regulation is just evaporated.
yes, so we know that we've got the ability, or it appears the ability, to disrupt this technology with products like the colloidal gold. One thing I think would be interesting to look at is, once you remove the tech from that influence of the colloidal gold, can it reassemble? Is it a knockout, or is it a fact that it's still there, it's still got the right composition, given the influence to the electromagnetic radiation, it will reassemble again?
I think there is a level of complexity here, and again, this whole thing is quite systemic. So I'll provide my opinion as to what I think's going on, and quite a bit of this is guesswork. I think we're dealing with a system where we've got part of the weapon, if you like, is via the injection. Part of it is via these ribbons, which are in the food and the atmosphere. Part of it is also the heavy metals that are coming down, and there's clearly other issues with the spraying that we don't know about. One of the things that's become really apparent to me in the last few weeks, when I've been working with a couple of people, is how much cell phones turn us into an antenna. So our ability to absorb EMF or have problems with EMF is certainly related to cell phone usage. Yep. So we're dealing with a system which is related to the environment, the injections, the cell phones, the cell phone use. Yeah.
A corporation that I was sort of associated with a few years ago had done some testing on the mobile phones and the thermal testing of the mobile phones. So putting a phone up to your ear, and within 10 minutes, all the inside of the thermal imaging on the inside of the ear was like a red hot. And that was just from like 10 minutes on the phone. So if you're doing that for 10 minutes, and most people probably talk for more than 10 minutes on the phone, you can imagine what it's doing to the inside of your brain and your ear, having that phone so close to your ear. And of course, then they tested it again after some technology was placed on the phone to help reduce the radiation that was coming off these phones. And obviously it reduced it substantially. But, you know, things like not using earbuds and not using wireless headsets and things like that, like obviously it's wired, you know, or using what we call air tubes, so that there's no wires that go directly into your ears. It goes via a tube. So that was definitely very eye-opening to see, you know, and doing things like not putting the phone for men, say, in your pocket, because obviously it was reducing, you know, the fertility in men. And also a lot of women seem to put their phones inside their bras, and of course they saw an increase in breast cancers and things like that. So yeah,
I'd be keen to invite Matt Taylor and Shimon Bits, who are both experts in 5G.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shimon, he's got a pretty scary, shall I say, but informative presentation, and I think it's about time we had that discussion.
Absolutely.
Certainly Matt's position is we need to go back to 2G in pages. It's not going to be enough just getting rid of the earbuds, although that's going to be hard enough in itself. But just holding the phone changes the way your body receives radiation, and the more heavy metal and the more ribbons and fibers and things you've been exposed to, the more you're going to act as an antenna.
Wow.
So the problem with this high frequency radiation is, you don't feel it until your skin starts to burn or your organs start to get cooked. And it can be, we could be having lots of problems from our smart TVs, from our wireless routers. One of the things that's been highest on my EMF reader is actually talking on the phone in the car.
Wow.
And,
Really?
yeah. That just goes.
Well, when you think about it, you're in a big metal box, aren't you?
Yeah, and everything's bouncing around inside.
Yeah, yeah.
So I've resolved to try not to do that.
Yeah.
I think we should be turning our phones off when we don't need to be contacted, and we should be putting them in a Faraday bag, for a lot of the time.
It really is a trap, isn't it? Because have a look
Yeah.
at people's mobile phone usage.
Yeah.
It is our preferred source of all information. So whether it's, we're doing a Google search, we're using a calculator function, we're using it for entertainment, communication, we're on it all the time. I would say I would spend 8 to 10 hours every day talking to people on the mobile phone. Now, most of that's hands-free, but so what? It's still in very close proximity to me.
Are you holding? Yeah, you're probably holding your phone for quite a bit of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, but we need to be looking at going back to wired up devices. And if we really think about it, we could have a lot of wired up iPads around the house. We don't have to be wireless. We don't have to be on the phone. We can go back to using smart pages and things, and life can be different rather than going backwards. We can swap rather than stop using, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people might be interested to know that David was in the executive for quite a while. We kept it fairly quiet for many reasons. One of the most important reasons was David was well established in a global network of other medical professionals, scientists, researchers, media people, and we didn't want to sort of jeopardize any of that connectivity because he was also working with the Australia project. So we kept that pretty quiet. But David's been an invaluable member of the team since he's come on board. Our last executive meeting last week, a lot of the discussion was dominated around David's research. We're finding this stuff in the environment everywhere. Like we've said, in the water, in the food sources, this tech's coming through everywhere. So they've got another delivery system apart from the vaccine. That the vaccine may be part of it, and this other part's coming in. So we've really fundamentally agreed at that meeting that we need to look at the whole supply chain now, and we need to come up with plans to. We're working on a plan with Telstra. Telstra are pretty open to the idea that they already know that the sovereign tribes own the land here and their equipment's on it. So Kim and I have been working on the communication to get a meeting with Telstra so we can tell them what's happening. Because don't be surprised that there's a lot of people in there who don't know what's going on. Everything's compartmentalized. With the food system, and David can probably go into a bit more about what he's found and where he's found it. But in this food system, we're putting together a plan. I've been working on it. I had good communication today with some bankers. I'm putting a team together. We'll be meeting, I think, early next week, Monday. They want to roll out a model on the macro scale. So we're in discussions now to look within Githable Narakbal to buy back 1 million hectares of agricultural land. And so we will put communities together to support those agricultural operations. We'll put those farmers back into cooperatives so they can be controlled and come out from underneath the globalist control. And we can start to look at environmental methods we can use to start to control this tech and how it's getting into all the systems. So that's a pretty big scale plan that will be paddock to plate.
I believe we can get on top of this.
Yeah,
I think the first step is looking at what's happening, and not ignoring it. Making sure we know what the truth is, what's really going on, and then what we need to do first, second, and third. In terms of the meat lands, initially I was concerned that all of this was coming from the vaccinations and the cattle and so forth. This is not. There's actually the vaccines are a separate issue, particularly mRNA vaccines for livestock. I mean that clearly shouldn't happen, and that may introduce a whole nother level problem that we're not even aware of at the moment. But the ribbons are going to be in the troughs on the grass, so they're going to get into livestock, but we don't need them added to by processing. So your best bet is going to be, working with the farms directly, or your butchers who are working with the farmers directly, and avoiding pre-packaged meat products and so forth.
Yeah. So when you look at it, we're being forced back into a better lifestyle, where we need to look at the way that our food's produced, how the way the animals are raised, how they're controlled through the slaughter process, the distribution process. We have moved away from a community cycle into the globalist model, Woolies, Coles, Aldi, and where everything's prepackaged, it's all organized. So you're so far removed from the process. I have my own animals, and occasionally we harvest one, and people are blown away by the sight of a carcass, and they're like, "Oh, I can't eat that," because I've seen it. That's the reality. That's where our meat comes from. If we eat meat, but when you don't tell them and they taste it, they say, "Oh, gee, that's beautiful."
That's almost like what they used to do in the olden days, wasn't it? They used to harvest their own animals and grow their own food supply, and everything was nice and healthy, and they had their own natural medicines. And then, of course, we thought we were becoming a smart nation and started creating all these technologies that was actually, even though we thought it was helping us, has ended up doing us more harm than good. So now we want to reverse it. We want to go back to growing our own food supply, growing, harvesting our own animals so we can go back to eating them. So then we know what we're eating and what we're putting in and on our bodies. So.
Yeah, and I think we're still going to have, obviously degrees of the specialization. Is not everybody's going to do everything.
No.
I've been to Tokyo a couple of times, and I just love the fact that you can walk 100 meters up the road and you can get hard-boiled eggs and grilled fish and grilled chicken, and it's all fresh, and you can get one portion salads all made up. And yet, our normal is huge supermarket. Everybody's got big trolleys. Everybody's got big fridges to put the big things in your big fridges. Whereas in Japan, you've got a small fridge, but you only need a day or two, because it's you can just walk out your door and up the street in any direction, and you'll find a small shop that has everything you need, and it's all packaged in a way that's 90+% recyclable or incineratable, so it's not going into the landfill.
Excellent.
It's so true though, isn't it? That we've got these big fridges full of food, where we probably live near a shop that gets food delivery every day.
Yeah.
And it's just all these hammocks, but see, no one lives really close to a shopping center. Usually they're sort of isolated in a commercial zone, and most people drive to them. We don't have that community.
So we've been trained into a certain way of doing it.
Yeah.
And when you go to other places, you realise that's or
we've been prepping. Yes, exactly, Sammy. Lots of people have been prepping and stocking up and having multiples for not just for convenience, but just in case. But for our listeners out there, if you are someone who does like to go shopping or whatnot, I'd just like to mention a fantastic little app that got recommended to us years and years ago. And there's a few of them around, but one of my favorite is an app called Chemical Maze. And you can have it on your phone. Yes, you're using your phone when you're at the shops, but you can have it on your phone when you're turning over. If you are buying any packaged products, you can actually see if they've got any numbers on and if those numbers are harmful. The thing I like about Chemical Maze, it's just a simple traffic-like symbol system. With if the product comes up with a green smiley face, it's generally okay to use. If it comes up with orange, well, you can decide whether you want to still get the product. And certainly anything that comes up with a red face, we don't even go near it. But it will actually also tell you what it's derived from and all the side effects and things like that. So if you've had any of these side effects in the past from products you've eaten with these numbers in it, you can start to think, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't be eating these products because they're having this effect on me. So it's a fantastic little app that you can download, and you can also get it in a book. And I highly, highly recommend it for anyone who still, will purchase foods from the supermarket, but also start to grow your own food supply. So.
Yeah. So when you look at the commercial system that's been set up to sell food, the Woolies, the Coles, the Aldis, their structure is such that they've killed the competition because they've monopolized the market. They've killed the competition for the local greengrocer, the local corner store, the local butcher, the local baker. These things are things we've seen disappear out of our society. And so then you go and look at the ownership of who owns these behemoths, and there's all your international players again. This is the model they've rolled out, and we did it for convenience, and they tricked us into buying huge refrigerators that we fill full of food, and probably 30% of food gets wasted in the fridge, because most fridges are so full we don't even know what we've got in them most of the time. So it's just a society we've become.
Yeah, we can change that.
Yeah, we have to change that.
We do.
So when you look at the vaccine, we're really looking at a maintenance cycle, a removal cycle, and a complete change of lifestyle cycle as well, aren't we, to beat this?
We're going to need to look at our water too quite carefully as well. One of the European researchers who spoke to us, our group last week, distills all this water and then structures it, and that's probably we probably need a half hour, an hour conversation on structured water and what that is and how that works. In maybe the cities in Europe are worse than here, but I think probably just the filter on the fridge is probably not enough for what we're dealing with. I think buying bottled water is asking for problems.
Well, that's still quite acidic. We've done some testing on some of those bottled waters when we were involved in a water filtration company or a medical grade device company. We actually tested a lot of those bottled waters to see how the pH of them. And a lot of them are still quite acidic, including coconut water that you buy like in the cartons you think is healthy. And that's actually still quite acidic. The only healthy coconut is from a real coconut. So it was actually a bit of an eye-opener that, you know, people think they're buying bottled water, and it's not as, you know, good as, it's probably better than tap water, which has got all the fluoride and the chemicals and stuff in it, but it's still quite acidic as well.
Yes, I was just reflecting on the fact that I'm looking at health acts for various different countries around the world, and it just staggers me how much of the health act is related to pandemics
Yeah.
and fluoridization of water supplies, you know, and
David, sorry, Lance, you mentioned, oh, just a quick question. You mentioned earlier, this is from one of our listeners, you mentioned earlier in the communities that it would be good if communities could get together and perhaps purchase as a community group, or even via one of our tap groups, I suppose, if they got together to purchase one of these dark microscopes and start testing for themselves different, you know, the bloods and things like that, and learn how to use it. Can you give our listeners a bit of an idea about, you know, what to buy and where to get that from?
Yes, I certainly can, and I offered today to provide some training over Zoom, and we can probably do some tutorial videos, you know, in due course. The type of microscope you or how much you need to spend depends on your budget. I mean, you can certainly do quite a lot with $500. You can do a lot more with 10 grand. But a lot of the older microscopes that are 15 years old can be updated with new cameras and things. So 4,000 or 5,000 will get you something that's really good. My advice would be for groups to work with their local naturopaths that are doing live blood analysis and looking at these things already. I can certainly happy to advise people of what I've been using, and I've helped somebody locally upgrade their scope with a new camera, new 4K camera, new software, and a couple of new lenses, and that's transformed things for them. So their scope was about 15 years old. So there's quite a few scopes in the community that are underutilized. It may be that the local naturopath is happy for it to be used after hours or with supervision, or, you know, yeah.
Excellent, thanks. Lance, you had a question that I interrupted you before.
Yeah,
Did you want to ask that question?
Yeah, David, have you analysed any water under the microscope from a reverse osmosis, or, you know, a high quality filtration system?
No, I haven't once. No.
Right, maybe we should set that up.
Yeah, I'm wondering. I'm certainly happy to do it, but it's very much, this is what I found at this time.
Yep.
And it's yeah. It's something we need to be doing on a regular basis. The only way to be 100% sure is to distill the water. Maybe that's what we need to look at doing on a community basis. But we need to have those discussions on ongoing basis. Yeah.
David, we've got about 20 minutes left on the call this evening. You mentioned to us before that we might be lucky enough to see a bit of live blood action tonight. Would that be possible? How many of our participants would like to see some live tests and live blood samples that David is going to do? He's just going to get a moment to get that set up. But how many of you, just drop it in the chat there if you'd like to see this and see what David actually does. Yeah, I know Lance does. Yeah. Oops, we've lost him. I'm sure he'll come back in just a sec.
I'm just setting up.
Excellent. Yeah, here they come. But yes, please. They're all very keen, David, to see this live blood. So thanks for staying with us, guys. It's going to be very, very exciting. David will be sharing the screen in just a moment, and you'll be able to see what he's doing.
Yeah, I'll put the camera back on. I've just put some oil on the dark field condenser, which is the special light concentration lens underneath the slide. And here's a slide I prepared earlier. Now I shall collect a sample of blood. This won't hurt you at all. I think I'll break on that.
While David's doing that, I think that it's important to note from the contamination that we're finding in the environment is you can't escape this on a micro level. So growing veggies at home isn't going to cut it. It's a good idea. It's a fantastic idea. I'm not trying to say don't do it. You also running away into a commune isn't going to cut it because of the geoengineering and the way they're doing this program. This is something we've all got to come together to solve this problem. And this is going to be a whole system change. And we knew we'd have to clean up a pretty bad environment, but we didn't know that they were going to bombard us with tech on the way out because they're losing the battle. But that's what it appears like that they're trying to do. So we're in a serious spot. When David was telling me what they're finding, it shocked me back into reality because I've become pretty blasé lately that we're getting on top of this. But we're still in a war. We've still got a big fight in front of us. And I knew they'd fight to the death. I just didn't think they would be this cavalier.
Yeah.
But yeah, they are.
David, you mentioned growing food undercover before, and that's something that obviously I was talking to my partner about. And then we were like, well, how does the sun going to get in and grow these vegetables? And someone has mentioned like what, in a shed? Are you thinking more like a greenhouse or a glass house or something like that where the sun can still come in, but it's actually not going to have the chemtrails falling down on it, things like that? Hydroponics, someone else says.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You need to keep the rain off. I've got a friend in New Zealand who lost half of his 10-year-old bonsai trees because of the acid rain recently in Hamilton. That's certainly going to happen here too. Yeah.
We recently got some filters that we put on our outside taps that now when we water our plants and our vegetables outside, the actual water that's going through onto them is now filtered water as well. As a start, you know,
that's a good start.
Yeah, so there's plenty of grow houses that made out of sort of all sorts of poly tarps that let enough light through for plant growth.
Right, so lots of clumping. That may have been a bit of nerves.
Is it your blood?
Yeah, this is my blood. This is the drop I've just taken. This is very typical of the sort of ribbons that we see in here we go. Yeah. In the vaccine and in the meat, and everywhere. Very typical like this. Translucent, you can see the red cells behind it. There appears to be sort of almost two tubes with a thinner bit in the middle. So this is currently using the 40 times objective, so it gives us about 400 times magnification.
So David, what you're saying is we shouldn't be seeing these in a normal situation in a healthy environment.
No. So we only started seeing these structures basically when people started to get vaccinated.
Right.
And then about 3 months after that, we started seeing them in everybody.
David, do you
Right.
know what the ribbons are made of? Is one question from one of our listeners. Do you know what they're made of?
An early analysis from the UK that was commissioned by Tess Lowry for the World Council for Health, and that was early 2021, and using a technique called Raman spectroscopy. They had a look at these ribbons in the vaccine, and they concluded that it was highly likely that they were graphene.
Right.
Mm.
So this is a white cell here.
Can they be
Yeah.
detoxed at all, David? Once they're in the body through the vaccines, or are they permanently in there now?
So there's quite a few things that we can do that seem to make these less of a problem in the blood, and I'll talk to that shortly. These bubbles have occurred recently. We're not really sure what's happening. They're not just bubbles, as you can see. They've actually got material inside them. So we're having quite a bit of discussion as to what that means. So I like to differentiate live blood checks from live blood analysis. So live blood analysis is a discipline in itself. Whereas the first thing I like to do is have a look and see how much clotting is going on, and obviously it's quite a bit.
Speaking of clotting, will the ribbons cause clots when they block the capillaries? Is another question from our listeners.
They're certainly going to have that potential for sure.
Are you still picking up MAC addresses and things like that from inside the vaccines?
The MAC address situation is an ongoing area that we're looking at, particularly with Matt Taylor in Ecuador. It's not an easy thing to nail down. Yeah, but it's a work in progress.
A question from one of our listeners that obviously listened to the last time you were on here is they'd like to know how Patrick's going.
Patrick's doing really well. He's back at work. His blood looks better than mine at the moment. I had a look at his blood over the weekend. So often these bubbles are associated with graphene structures like that one, and they often have white cells near them. So that's a white cell VRS suite. So those little dots in the background, that's your chylomicron. So that reflects the fact that I had avocado fatigue. That's a white cell, and you can see the granules moving inside.
Yeah.
And these are obviously the red blood cells.
Who's excited to be seeing this live on Triple Tap, the only place you'll see live blood samples? Give us some love in the chat there as David's sharing what he's seeing under the microscope live on Triple Tap.
Okay, so that's a smaller bit of a smaller structure, very typical of the sort of thing we see. And often I'll photograph that at this 400 times magnification, and then when you see it, it gives much better definition.
Dr. Nixon, I'll let you answer this question. I think I know the answer. One of our listeners wants to know, is this from vaccinated blood or is this from shedding? Like, have you picked this up from someone else or?
Well, the problem is, well, because the ribbons are in the environment and in the food, I've looked at my blood and had no ribbons, and looked at my blood and had lots of ribbons. So it's variable. So if you fast for a couple of days, the ribbons disappear pretty much. If you do lots of strenuous exercise, there often seem to be more of them. EDTA seems to be something that's quite useful.
That's interesting. One of our listeners said his blood has ribbons and he's not been jabbed.
Yeah.
And is it possible to do any samples, show us any samples from food samples?
Yeah, it is.
We got about 10 minutes left.
What do people want? I thought I'd try and find something a bit bigger. That one might be more interesting. So what we're seeing has changed over time. It's different now from what it was 6 months ago. So we weren't seeing anywhere near as many of these things 6 months ago as we are now. These darker, thicker ones, and they seem to be producing bubbles. And this is, we're concerned about what these bubbles represent. Are they secreting toxins? Certainly Shimonienovitz has been hot on that. So there's a white cell there. So these are red cells, but this is actually a bubble, which inside of these, which presumably has come from the structure.
So you're saying that big long bit across the bottom of the screen from side to side should not actually be in the blood at all?
No, absolutely not. No.
Wow.
We weren't seeing that 12 months ago. Somewhere. You know, I'm in regular communication with people who have been doing this for the last 20 years. And they tell me they didn't see these structures up until when the vaccine started.
Bioweapons, yeah. Is there any protocols to potentially get rid of these from people's bodies if people start to see these, if they do go and get blood work done and they see these sorts of things? And it looks like something from outer space. Look at that.
Yeah.
The galaxy.
Yes, that's mostly bubbles.
Yeah.
There was operator error when I put the cover slip on. So the question was how to get rid of them. I think the key thing is that some people are having lots of problem with fatigue, neurological problems, and chest pain, and so forth, and brain fog. And I certainly think there are things we can do for all that. And there are websites which will provide some assistance with that. I'm just looking for a presentation.
And we might get those website links off you, David, so that when we do the replay, we can add those to the site when it goes up, and then people who are interested can then have a look at those.
Absolutely. No, that was my thought too. So I'll just load this one. There's 29 unread messages in the chat, but I will get to them.
No, but no, that's okay. I'm watching those for you.
Okay, cool. So this is a video that I took middle of last year of a fibre within the vaccine. And so this was a talk about the fibres. Whoops, going the wrong way. Let's not. Let's see if I can find the right part of that.
I was hoping you were going to play a bit of Midnight Oil for us, David.
I was. Do you want to say that again, Lance?
Absolutely.
That was very good. I remember saying that. Yeah.
Do you want to see my discussion with Ryan Cole? Shall I start this from the beginning?
How long does it go for, David?
It's not long.
Okay.
I might get in trouble though. So one of the people who's been very critical of my stance on the structures that we've been seeing in the vaccine is Ryan Cole, who's a pathologist in the US, and I had a bit of a discussion with him. So salt and cholesterol was what the structures were described as in fabric, and dust is what they're telling us we're seeing when we're looking at the blood. So that was me in this signal group talking about no, maybe I better not. Sorry, I better not show that one, but we'll do the midnight oil.
Yeah, we've only got a few moments left. That'd be good. Show the midnight oil. While you're getting that ready, we have another question. Dale's on fire tonight with the questions. What are the parasites ACCA politicians doing to care for themselves? We're not seeing that yet. We're not seeing that yet, David. You haven't shared the screen.
No, but David's having fun.
I'm bugging. I'm enjoying it. Yeah. Sorry, what was the question, Ainsley?
What are the parasites ACCA politicians doing to care for themselves? Because they obviously breathe, eat, and drink the same things we do. And my comment was, or do they?
Yes, well, that's a good question, isn't it?
I'll tell you my answer.
Sorry.
This whole process is so compartmentalized that this bunch of losers we call politicians probably doesn't even know what they've done to themselves. They just go on along with it because they're told what to do. That's how stupid these people are that we put our faith in. We used to put our faith in.
Puppets on a string come to mind, Lance.
Yeah.
All right, David, have you got that ready to share? Because we've got a couple of minutes to go.
It's all right. I am.
It's okay, David. We can go over.
We can go over? Right, yeah. Good. So I'm going to go from here.
I'll get in trouble for Ainsley for that statement later, but it'll be worth it.
You will, Lance. You will get in trouble. You're lucky we're not mainstream media.
We're just going to cut to a commercial break.
Go for it, David. There we go.
Okay. So I'm going to be serious. So This is the type of ribbon that we see in the vaccine associated with the structures. And these are the chip-like structures. This is a ribbon, and the conjecture is that there may be some sort of optical signals happening along there. And this is very similar structure that we see in the blood, as is this one. This was one for my blood recently. This was that one, and that one, and that one. What I'm coming to, that one was the same structure that was in supermarket bought venison, and it looks exactly the same. This is the sort of one. This is the appearance in the vaccine. This is the appearance in the blood, and it's very similar to the one that I showed you live. You almost don't need to see this now that you've seen it live, but this is one of these fibers with the This is also pretty cool. This is the white cell bogging along the fibre and pushing the red cell out of the way. So these type of fibres are something else we've only seen relatively recently. This is somebody, a vaccinated person down the Gold Coast I saw recently with one of these fibres, and these are the white cells. I think this is the hardest thing to criticise from their point of view. How can we get a fibre in the blood and have all these white cells turn up within seconds that are clearly this structure's been in the blood for some time?
Yep. David, you mentioned about fasting. What sort of time frame should people be looking at doing a fasting, particularly if people haven't done it before? Obviously, they've got to ease into it, but what sort of a time period? A week? 30 days?
There's a group called Australian Awakenings, and they have a protocol that involves a 3-day water fast. The short answer is we don't know. It may be the intermittent fasting. I suspect that we're recontaminating ourselves with these fibres all the time. We're breathing them in, we're eating them, we're drinking them. And therefore they're showing up. I suspect we're mainly eating them so that when we fast we seem to have less. And certainly if we do strenuous exercise with a lot of muscle movement, we seem to get more fibres present. But we seem to be able to improve the brain fog, the chest pain, the neurological symptoms with colloidal gold. We seem to be able to lessen the amount of these ribbons with the use of VDTA foot bars, and certainly we'll make that information available to listeners. But we're still trying to figure a bit of this stuff out. Yeah. I think the key thing is paying attention to food and the water. I think we're going to have that. Seems to be the key thing.
Is there any connection with the ribbons and what the embalmers are seeing in the morgues? Do you know?
Good question. I suspect not, because these are in everybody and not everybody's dying. And so I suspect this is a combination thing, and if they ramp up 5G, I suspect we're going to have more problems.
Yep. And does colloidal silver help, or only colloidal gold? Great question.
Colloidal gold seems to be really useful for the brain fog and for fatigue. Colloidal silver seems to be useful for some of the biofilm that we're seeing in the blood, which we suspect is fungal, and the colloidal silver seems to be able to help with that. It's multifactorial, and we're going to need a number of solutions, and we're going to need doctors who are prepared to look at it, which is a bit of an issue in itself, unfortunately.
We'll definitely have to get you back on periodically from time to time to see and get more updates of what's transpiring under there, and hopefully more and more people will take your advice and go out as a group and get their own dark microscope and start looking and then asking those questions. And any of our listeners who are interested in that, then please reach out. David, as he said, is happy to do some Zooms to teach people how to use that. And of course, we would definitely be getting David back on from time to time to see how things progress as we move forward. So as much as we would love to keep chatting, we've only gone over a few moments this week. So look, everybody, I hope you thoroughly enjoyed tonight's session talking with David and seeing live blood samples here on Triple Tap. Lance, I want to thank you. David, thank you so much for your time and your skills and your all your information. And thank you everybody for joining us. And we'll see you same time, same place next week on Triple Tap. Bye for now.
Thanks, guys. See you.